the idea for the intermediate group was, again, we're going to be pretty freeform, and I want to enable us to just really address as many of your questions as possible. To lead us off, though, some of what we were thinking of focusing on here is having conversation, particular in regard to the block completion requirements, and we've actually shifted those a little bit since the first 2 years of the project. So if you have any questions about how those block completion requirements might have changed, what it means to, what we need to do to actually reach block completion, and maybe playing around in eBird with some of the data to, again, revisit. I don't know if it was Glenn or Doug showed this. No, I guess it was Glenn showed it briefly, how you can use eBird to look at the data in a block, but how to really kind of target our efforts this year so that you're both getting data for priority blocks, but also adding data for specific species that might help complete any block for that matter. Oh good, thanks, Logan. It's really hard being a host because you have to watch like 4 different things at the same time. So I guess, do any of you have any questions just on the basic level of what it means to complete a block, or what is needed to complete a block, or what we're talking about when we say completing a block? Let's just make sure we're all on the same page with that terminology first.
It's 20 hours, right?
So it's a little bit more than that. We have changed the basic, so in the volunteer handbook, and it's really, apparently I'm not good at talking and kind of navigating things online at the same time. So hold on here. I'm gonna try to share my screen so you all can sort of see what I'm doing. Go back to that, share my screen. Da-da-da. Logan, if you can keep an eye on the chat box and just interrupt me if things pop up and
sure,
I'm off track.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just going to pull up the volunteer handbook. If you go to the homepage for the project, you can get to this handbook. And we'll scroll down, I don't know off the top of my head. How to know when your Atlas block is complete, page 9. So we haven't updated everything online, and we're not going to print a whole new round of handbooks related to this edit. But we have adjusted the total survey time requirement a bit depending on where in the state you are. As we've looked at the data, it's at a minimum for most blocks. Yes, you need 20 hours of survey time. But for some areas that are more remote in the state, we are accepting 15 hours. So that information, you don't need to necessarily know what block you are in and what that requirement is. When you enter it in eBird, we've identified on our end those blocks, so the completion requirements will get updated on our end from the staff end regarding the total number, when that total number of hours has been reached. But it's not just total number of hours. So for both the breeding and wintering season, we really want to encourage people to try to cover at least one representative habitat type within each block. If given whatever is permitted and accessible. Obviously, timing of visits ideally would be spread out over the season, but we also encourage people to kind of go out and just try to get a bunch done in a weekend in June, that is an opportune time. But the two big things are the total survey time, as I mentioned, and then the percent of confirmed breeders. So at the outset of the project, we were following the 50% or more of the species detected in the block rule, that once that 50% were confirmed, then we could consider it complete. But a lot of other states have followed suit in accepting the higher probable codes as well. So we've adjusted our block completion requirements over the last year through steering committee meetings, et cetera, to reflect both an adjustment in the total survey time, but also the percent of breeding codes. So now, I got so distracted with just trying to navigate all these new links and everything. I didn't pull up. Do you happen to have the new completion requirements in front of you, Logan?
Yeah, so it's 60% confirmed or probable now. And that's using the higher probable codes.
Yep.
So those would be, agitated behavior, probable nest site, courtship and copulation, territorial defense. So those higher codes on the probable list, which, perfect.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So anything. Yep. Oh, I can highlight. How cool is that? So yeah, any of these probable will also factor in with that total percentage. So is that a very confusing answer to your straightforward 20-hour question, Judy? And largely, I think these are pretty strong. We agreed as a committee that these behaviors here are just as strongly indicative of breeding, at least for our purposes of, mapping resource use around the state by these birds and really pulling in and making sure we can spread effort around enough so that everything's getting completed. So Logan, if you want to chat a bit, I just have a couple emails I want to look at real quick regarding the Intermediate Atlas workshop. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll sort of jump back to Glenn's presentation earlier in terms of finding areas, suitable areas of habitat. The interactive map is a really great resource for that. So you can go on there, you can download those topo maps, which pretty nicely breaks down the habitat in the area, and you can get a sense of, are there grassland areas in here? Are there wetland areas? And it can kind of give you a kind of a basic gauge of where you should be spending your time. So I've used that a lot. So Adrian's going to bring that up there. I think that'll be great. But yeah, as Adrian said, it's an access thing too. So if you're in a block and there's a small wetland area within that block, and it's an island inside of posted property, obviously you're not going to be able to access that. So it's the areas that are accessible. You want to reach all the different habitat types that you can that are accessible. So yeah, do you want to pull up one of those topo maps?
Yep. So when you zoom in, just so folks know how I got to this page, again, if you're not already familiar, from the project homepage, there's this link to the interactive block map here, which opens up this application. And once you zoom in close enough that you can click on an individual block, you get options here to download a topo or aerial imagery block, or map of each block, sorry. So when you click on that, this is some of the work that Amy, whom you met at the outset of the webinar here, is responsible for. She put together, so we have 4,080 blocks in the state, and she created a topo and aerial map for each block. So over 9,000 blocks, block maps that she made. So as Logan was saying, you know, this is a great resource where you can go in and look at topographically what you have on the landscape to work with within a block. You can have the alternative is to go in and look at aerial imagery, which sometimes does a better job at kind of showing you roads and whatnot. And I don't know what this is a nice block that has good conservation land.
Yeah. So we've got a good question here, Adrian, on habitat. So Judith Rowe asks, how do you know that every habitat was covered in order to call it complete?
Whoops, how did I get back? So that's a great question, Judy, because we really don't. The two requirements for block completion that we can kind of quantitatively track are those, the number of hours and the percent completed and probable. But as far as us being able to actually factor in habitats being visited as part of, you know, our algorithm that filters out and determines completion, we can't. We just say that in writing, so, and hope that most volunteers are kind of heeding that advice. And on some level, the percentage of confirmed, excuse me, the percentage of confirmed and probable breeders should hopefully capture that, because it's very difficult to get a robust list of species for a block and an even more robust percentage to reach that 50% or 60% criteria if you're not really visiting a diverse set of habitats. So some of, you know, most of these criteria have been built in here as recommendations, but with the hours and the total percentages really being the metrics that have been identified from, you know, many other states and other atlases being completed, and looking at these kind of species accumulation curves and building these estimates of when is reasonable to call a block complete. I somehow lost my option to view the chat. How do I, oh, there it is. Okay. It's really confusing when you're sharing your screen and trying to navigate.
Yeah,
The chat moves around. The chat box moves around depending what you're doing.
Yes. If you have not entered, so Mary Grace, can you, are you able to turn your mic on? I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
My question was, if I haven't been keeping track of my hours for the volunteer survey, how do I know that I've spent 20 hours? Or who decide? You decide that it's complete, correct? Or I decide? Okay.
Nope. So we'll do all of the deciding. We have formulas built in that are automatically in our eBird portal to calculate that. And so eBird, that's one of the reasons that we decided to go with eBird, was because they had a lot of these functionalities already built in. And as you enter data into eBird, it will identify the amount of time or effort. There's one exception to that, and we encountered this early on in the project. And so we have folks working with we have like a bird nerd data team that are also looking at blocks. There's been the rare exception where if you submit, let me get into eBird again. My apologies. I can't seem to like think about where to navigate and talk about something different at the same time. So let me just get you to an example of what I'm talking about here. And so if I'm just kind of generically want to explore the data, I go there and I usually just pull up the Atlas effort map. There was a question in the earlier session about, could somebody post a link to the priority effort map that Glenn had shown? And this is how you get to that same information. He essentially just took a screenshot.
Right.
I'm starting to zoom in on here.
So I can go to that and look at my block and see
Yeah.
if it's finished or not?
Yes, exactly.
I can. Okay.
So you can zoom right in, and we'll just click on, well, I kind of wanted to look at my block near Bangor somewhere.
You can look at mine and tell me if I'm done.
Do you know the name of your block?
Yeah, it's Casco CE.
Okay, perfect. So here, we don't even have to navigate with the map. I just go here if I don't know the actual name of the block, which I usually don't because I'm looking at a different one every day practically. So Casco CE, we'll get that as an option. That'll take us right to the block. So you can see that your status is currently incomplete. You have well over the 20 hours, but what's limiting the completion is that you haven't reached that 50 or 60% mark with number of probable or confirmed. And so you can see you have a total of 55 species, but a low percentage of confirmed here. And so what I like to do, what I find really helpful, is you can sort, once you go into this eBird page where you're looking at your block data, you can then sort your data by breeding evidence. Did it do it? No. Well, you can click on it and it'll try to sort. There we go.
Okay.
And so you can now see what species have been confirmed and what are your probables.
Okay.
And so this is a way now where you can really target your effort to look for those specific species. So, you know, instead of going out and spending a ton more time just kind of doing general atlasing, you might want to focus on, you know, getting that goldfinch or hermit thrush or, you know, yellow-rumped warblers, or some of these are trickier, mourning doves, you know, crows. That would probably be a really easy one to bump up from a habitat to a confirmed. They're carrying sticks like crazy. You get, you know, when the young are out of the nest, they're so noisy. They're pretty, you know, so pick some of these even, you know, low-hanging fruits, gray catbirds, your bobolinks, your ovenbirds, you know, so you can really identify which species you want to go out there and target. And then given that, and that's kind of why I think the Atlas is so cool, is that because it, you know, you may not really know that much when you look at this list of like, okay, well, crap, where did I find that grosbeak, or where did I find that black-throated green warbler? But then it kind of encourages you to go and refresh your memory and learn a little bit more about the natural history of these species too. So then you can target your efforts to locate those habitats. So you may have this block map, excuse me, that we pulled up like Logan was talking about, that shows you the different habitats. And then you have this list of species. And so now you just have to make the link between which species you still need to confirm or, you know, bump up, and where to find them on that habitat map.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right, two things out of the chat here. So Nick asks about, you know, how to complete a block that's really dense or has a lot of inaccessible areas. He's in a priority block that's heavily wooded. And then just to put a tip in here that Craig shared. So if you want to temporarily unmute yourself, you can hold down the space bar just to temporarily unmute yourself.
Oh, I did not know that. Thanks,
I didn't know that
Craig.
either. That's handy.
Are you able to do that? Oh no, that wouldn't work for you, Bob. You're on the phone. Just wave at us if you want us to unmute you or something. I don't know. Okay. So Nick's question, what do you do if you have a block that is really dense? Well, first of all, kudos to you for selecting a challenging block. And I would say, sorry, I got distracted by the chat. So for those of you who might know, Bob is actually a mentor of mine from Pennsylvania, a very good friend, and he was the coordinator for the Pennsylvania Breeding Bird Atlas before I moved to Maine. Some background history on me. So he was sharing some insight, because I am not remembering all of the requirements that we did for the second Pennsylvania Breeding Bird Atlas. So I'll have to read that in its entirety after the fact, Bob, but thank you. Or if we have a break. So Nick, I guess, can you unmute yourself? Is your question with respect to like landowner concerns or just challenging off trail issues or off the beaten path issues?
Very much challenging off the beaten path issues. The block is basically starts around Green Top and goes up towards the northeast corner of Ziskawas Lake. And their response, I've tried getting into there on foot, that you run into this wall of vegetation that you can barely even see anything, let alone pass through it.
So I know exactly what you're talking about because two of my species of interest for research in Maine has been the rusty blackbird and the McNell's thrush. And so I have spent much time trying to bust through that kind of habitat in attempts to find those birds. It's funny, I always characterize their habitat as places where a sane individual would not want to venture. Because they're just so dense. I don't know that I have any great advice. If you are committed to trying to get through some of it, I guess here's what I tend to do is look. Have you looked at your block on Google Earth and just sort of, yes? You can keep unmuted. So that's usually what I do is I look on Google Earth and I try to identify where there might be some skid trails or something that could at least get me on the periphery of some of that densest vegetation.
That's sort of what I'm forced to doing is working and logging cuts in the skidder trails because it's the only way to get back into some of these places.
Yeah.
But one of my questions sort of stems to the habitat. You saying the various habitat types. That block is pretty much just all forest. So is there anything else you want me to be looking for in there?
No, I mean, if the habitat is predominantly forest, that's, if you are only getting forest birds, that's probably a pretty accurate representation of that block.
Okay. The question sort of stems because I've got over 20 hours in there, but the block isn't completed because of the percentages. But sometimes finding the percentages in there is tough.
Yeah.
I realize that's the nature of the beast, but I really like to get this block completed. Just for the sake of saying that it's been completed.
So have you had any help trying to complete the block?
No, it's pretty much been me and a one-man operation.
Yeah, nobody else wants to do it.
Yeah, I tell people where I'm going, they all look at me and say, "Are you crazy?"
You're crazy. So, well, we should stay in touch because one, my rusty blackbird work got canceled for this year because of Corona, but I end up out in the Western Mountains where you are near Ziskawas. That's where that work is. So I'm just thinking, if we could partner somebody with you when it's safe enough to do so, somebody that's willing, then maybe we could try to tackle that and just get a couple more confirmations.
That would be helpful.
That being said, where do you know the block name, for example? I'm just curious how.
I want to say it's Lincoln Pond Northeast. I was just trying to find it on the IFNW website because I was drawing a blank on the name myself.
Oh, I gotta go back 2 spaces. So while I am doing this, I will just say that kind of getting back to Mary Grace's question about, how well, that can't be right. Will this take me to that block on the map? No. So what we did find, for example, I'll just stay here for a minute again, because I can't multitask my brain with navigating websites. So the one exception we found with keeping track of these hours and dealing with completions is that one person, one of the other biologists that I work with in the Bangor office here, Beth Schwartz, she has pretty much completed her block, but her effort hours here do not reflect that. Her effort hours here say like 0.78 or something. And the reason is because she's atlased her entire block pretty much incidentally. So when you submit your records into eBird, it asks you to submit whether you were traveling or a stationary count, or if this is just an incidental observation. If it was just an incidental observation, these effort hours do not get factored in. So just to get back to your question, Mary Grace, about how we're dealing with this. So in addition to just leaning on the tools in eBird and the formulas that we've input to calculate this for us, we are going through and identifying blocks at the end of each year. Glenn does this huge export from the eBird database, and we look at blocks where there's a big species list and it meets the percentage of confirmations and probables, but not necessarily the hours. And where it's a case where those hours are lacking just because of how the birding was taking place on an incidental level, that is still getting caught. So if you ever encounter something like that where you feel like, hey, I put in all this time, but it's not really showing up here, reach out to us, let us know, and that'll kind of raise a red flag already for that block. But for the most part, you should be able to track your hours here. I don't know if Nick just walked away, so I don't know if he's gonna I'll wait till he comes back and tell him to figure out the name of his block. But yeah, I don't know. If you can figure out the name of your block, Nick, we'll look at it together. But
it's Lincoln Pond Northwest.
Northwest, okay. So close. So I'll just let it be silent for now. In a moment, I'm just going to ask, up to this point, is everybody in the room kind of keeping up with me and following how I'm navigating eBird and getting to these bits of data for different blocks?
Yeah, it's helpful for me. This is Craig.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure I wasn't leaving anybody in the dust. Okay, so let's sort by confirmed. And it's frustrating, you're right, because you've already spent 32 hours in this block. So we'll have to look at it because you have a lot of probables here, Nick. So I'm not sure when some of what is in here, and this is, I'd have to go back and ask Glenn because he's managing all of the data at this point. But do you know, Logan, have you been involved in this? Do you know how he has updated?
I have not been involved with this. So yeah, this is Glenn's territory for sure.
I'm going to make a note of this block, Nick, because I don't know if maybe And again, we have, 4,000 blocks, so it would not surprise me that something falls through the cracks and gets missed. But we should have him rerun that formula for completion, because with the probable codes, with your probable and confirmed combined, unless they're really low probables, that should put you into complete. Oh yeah, they're a lot of the S7s.
Yeah, I don't think S7 is on that threshold.
Oh, that's tricky. I would say the best strategy that I could come up with, other than let's tag team that block just to get it finished, go out for a day, like you take half and I'll take half. I could even do that this year. I'll come out by myself and we just go to completely opposite ends of the block. Is that spend a day focusing on very specific species, but wait until July. I would wait until July, when I would expect there to be family groups out. And then hopefully we could get those family groups confirmed by sight or by sound, and not having to maybe trudge through really dense forest. That would be one strategy that I would take. Okay, so
we've got a
Logan.
question here from Rick. So Rick, you can unmute yourself. If you do not see a breeding behavior, do we log the sighting? So yes, you can always log your sightings. If it's a list where you don't see any breeding behaviors at all, that's going to go into the Maine Birds portal. And if you have a list where you do have breeding behaviors, and you have some species that you don't see any breeding behaviors for, you can still record those. They would just be, you wouldn't associate any code with them. You would just say they'd be logged as observed. Does that answer your question?
Did we lose Rick?
We might have.
Did you get that?
Who's that?
A mystery.
Oh no, he's still on the participant list, so hopefully that makes sense. So
Are you able to hear me?
yes, you're on now.
Okay, yeah, that answered my question.
Okay.
I live in an area where for a lot of years you have they breed, but this year there's a pair of eagles that are flying around. One of them is not in adult plumage, so I'm assuming that they are not a pair that should be logged.
So I guess I'm just kind of following up on your thought with the eagles. So you're reluctant to log them as a pair because one is oh my God, form a sentence, Adrian. One is not in adult plumage. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
You could have, I mean, it doesn't mean that they're not a pair. I would agree, probably just err on the side of caution and revisit it later, give it another week or two and see. But you can have third and fourth year birds pairing up.
All right, and I know where the nest is as well. So if you see both of them at the nest, then you can assume that they are a pair.
Oh yeah, I think so. Even if there's one bird on a nest this time of year, it would be an occupied nest. And that would be confirmed, and that is going to trump any probable code anyway.
Right. Well, that's interesting because the same nest last year had an eagle on it for maybe a week, and then all of a sudden it was an osprey nest. They actually was a breeding pair of osprey took over, and had babies out of it. So
That can happen.
yeah, so if you log breeding pair of eagles and then the ospreys take the nest, is it really legitimate? I don't know.
Yes, it is. And that's a great point and question. So keep in mind that the goal of the Atlas is not to assess productivity or success. It's just to identify distribution of breeding effort around the state. And so there are a number of things, number of reasons, even all of our, I coded a cardinal outside my window carrying nesting material before we got that big snowstorm, a week and a half ago. And that, just completely flattened all the bushes and trees, and they've since abandoned it. So the same question would go with that. Okay, well, they're no longer, using that nest. They abandoned that nest attempt. I'm assuming, they just went somewhere else. But that still counts as a valid breeding bird observation for the Atlas, because it suggests that their utilization of resources at the time to attempt to nest. So that's a great case of where you kind of get like more bang for your buck, because you get 2 confirmed species instead of 1. So yeah, that's a great question. That absolutely counts.
All right, great, thank you.
Yep. If we are in Maine eBird and get breeding bird info, can we switch to Maine Breeding Bird Atlas? Leslie, so yes, if you are you talking about in the app or on the computer? Would you like to see that?
Okay. If we're in the eBird app out in the field, and then we find a species as we're going along that has breeding behavior, and so we've already checked that we're in the regular eBird Maine.
Yep.
And now we need to put it into the eBird Maine Atlas. Can we switch that before we submit it?
Yeah. I am not as savvy with the app, so I would say my best suggestion would be to just submit it where it is. Mm-hmm. And then when you come into your checklists, you come back into the system and view your checklists, and then you can just click that checklist to switch it over.
Oh, you can do that right when you're online?
Yes. Yeah. So I was just realizing I'm not even actually signed into eBird. So let me do that so this can be helpful. Hopefully that is the right. Yeah. So now I'm signed in. So I can go to my account, or I can go to my eBird. Keep an eye on the chat, Logan. I'm going to minimize it so I can see what I'm doing. So you can find, oh my gosh, so many things to look at. Here we go, my checklist. So you want to go here, manage your checklists, and then you would find your list here. And when you view or edit it, up here in checklist tools, sorry, you have the option here to change portal. So you can just go right there and change your portal. When you click that, it'll ask you where you want to change it to, and then done.
All right.
That's the way I do it. There may be, I'm like 90% sure that once you've started a checklist.
You're right, Adrian.
In
Once
the
it's
app,
started, it's in that portal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that gets to a really good point too. And so we talked about this a little bit too on the Q&A session this past Wednesday, was that, and I talked with Ron Joseph yesterday about it as well. And so people were asking specific questions like, well, so should I just wait until June to go out in Atlas so then I can be sure that, you know, everything's going to be breeding and I can just put everything in the Maine Bird Atlas portal? And it definitely depends on your level of activity. And that's what I always like to emphasize too, because your level of involvement in the project can be as much or as little as you want. So I personally, just because I don't have a lot of flexibility to get out and just bird, if I'm going out with a specific purpose to look for breeding evidence. So even now in April, when a lot of species aren't technically within their safe dates, I've changed my app over to the Maine Bird Atlas portal, because I'm more out there for the Atlas purpose. I'm less of an eBirder. I don't usually just go out and eBird records. So I've gone ahead and changed my portal now, because I know when I'm going to be entering stuff, it's going to be Atlas specific. But a lot of people, and that's really good, valuable data to still have. If you're just going out and eBirding, you're going to encounter that situation like you just asked about, Leslie, where you know, you end up in Maine eBird, which I would agree with you is probably the safer default one to go with now. Maybe in another couple weeks, as things become a little bit more active, it might be, you know, so you kind of have to pick what date is comfortable for you, or what level of activity, or, you know, even during this transition period, how much you decide you want to contribute to eBird or not. I don't know if any of that made sense.
That's good. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so we got a question in the chat about hints on finding eagle nests. So Mary Grace has seen eagles flying over their lake in the summer, but they haven't been able to confirm any breeding in their block. Do we have any tips for that?
I don't know. What do you think, Logan? I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, so eagle nests are interesting. So it's definitely going to be about kind of following those birds. They are fairly conspicuous because they're so large, and you know, you can look for them flying with food items. That's generally what I shoot for. But yeah, they're typically nesting in, you know, really large trees near water bodies. So, you know, I make a point of scanning large trees in the shoreline as I, you know, work a Atlas block with a lake or a pond. But yeah, just kind of watching for behavior and using that to guide you back to the nest itself.
So I'll add 2 bits to that. So one thing, I think, you know, watching for a bird carrying food away is definitely the great opportunity to potentially get an idea of where it's headed. But remember that for eagles and other raptors that would normally be carrying their food, you don't want to actually use that as your breeding code.
Right.
So just be careful with that. But as an indicator of, you know, just watching behavior and seeing where the birds go, that's great. The other thing I would add, not to discourage you, Mary Grace, from trying to find your eagle nests, if you can do so without getting too close or causing any level of disturbance, that, you know, go for it. I think that's kind of a fun endeavor. Oh my gosh, time flies. No, it was 2018. I wanted to say last year, but it wasn't last year. It was 2018. The state actually completed a aerial survey for eagle nests of the entire state of Maine. So it doesn't mean that there's not one out there that we could have missed, but it was a pretty thorough survey, flown, you know, aerial transects, where Charlie Todd and some other regional biologists, they documented well over 700. That data should be, we sent it to eBird to do a bulk upload. So you might even want to check your block as well online, because the eagles might already have been confirmed for that area. So if that's one that you're specifically trying to find for the purpose of the Atlas, we probably already have it covered. But if you want to find it just for fun too, knock yourself out. Figuratively, of course.
All right, so we got another question in the chat. So as coordinators this year, do you think it's more important to have people adopt a block or show them how to enter observations and try to find a priority block to bird in? That's Judy.
Yep. So I would say, Judy, the latter. With that being said, you know, if people can, if you're going to encourage people to adopt a block, direct them to priority blocks for sure. The adopting a block thing can sometimes cause confusion among volunteers, because especially at the beginner level, that phrase or term sometimes lends itself to individuals thinking they can't contribute observations. Oh, that block's already adopted, so I can't go there, or I don't want to go there, which
Right.
that absolutely isn't the case. So especially at the beginner level, and at this stage in year 3, I would lean towards the latter. I mean, I think any effort you make at trying to get volunteers engaged is worthwhile. That being said, you know, again, the adopt a block thing is really just a tool for us on the planning side to have a good idea looking forward towards the end of the project of where we can count on places being done. So that same concept we can achieve by just looking at the eBird data as well. So somebody can go out there and complete a priority block and not have adopted it, and we're still going to get that same level of information. So I would lean on just, yeah, get them up to speed with how to enter observations. And if they really want to, if they're asking like, how do I focus on a particular area, just have them focus on understanding how to find a priority block. And if they want that level of ownership, it's definitely helpful. You can talk them through it. That being said, you know, especially given the current civil state of emergency, I don't want to discourage people from submitting observations if they don't live in a priority block. If they just want to submit stuff from their yard, but they're like, oh, I don't live in a priority block. I've heard that too from volunteers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, that's also the wrong message, kind of. So it's a tricky balance, but I think those are good things to emphasize for volunteers. Like, every data point is valuable. If it's a person that wants to venture afield, then yes, go into the priority block thing. If it's not, just encourage them to get out there and pay more attention to the birds in their yard, no matter where they are.
It just seemed you were focusing on the priority blocks now, and the adopt a block is a little complicated. So yeah, thank you. That was helpful.
Yes. Yeah, we're definitely shifting, you know. So in year 1 and 2, the general message was, so just get out there and bird. We don't care where you are in the state or, you know, what you're focusing on. Just if you see a breeding bird observation, let's get it contributed to the project. And now we're just shifting the message a little bit into year 3, where we're like, well, we do need to kind of redirect effort. But I also, I do tend to champion that objective 4 that I covered. That was, again, just kind of using the Atlas as a platform to inspire that connection with nature and the birds around all of us every day. And so it's a balance with that. You know, ultimately at the end of this project, it's going to be, you know, the 300 really invested, passionate birders that are going to complete those priority blocks. But it's going to be the other 1,200, 1,500, whatever people that have filled in all of the other little pieces around the state. And I see that, like, I just listened to a podcast last night about the Maryland Atlas effort, and they're just starting this year, and their message is very targeted to people who are already birding in the state and already e-birding and active on eBird. And I really like that our message is trying to reach a broader audience as well. So I get excited when somebody tells me that they noticed a robin with a worm in its mouth. I'm like, oh my God, Atlas record, yay!
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Oh, Craig, so that is an excellent point. So Craig just posted, Chuck Whitney is actually one of our regional coordinators, and he was one of the few people in the state that was around for the first Atlas and participated in the first Atlas. And his suggestion to Craig was to spend more time sitting and less time hiking and walking. And oftentimes just by being quiet, and this is kind of what gets to kind of your situation, back to your situation, Nick, a little bit too, where to go out there and get those confirmations or higher probable codes. You just need to go to a place. You don't have to bushwhack really far into somewhere. If you go where you're hearing a little bit of activity and just hunker down, just spend some time, let the birds kind of settle down and return to their normal behaviors after, you know, your disruption of getting there. And that really highlights a shift in your approach as a birder to achieve meeting these block completion requirements. So there's two strategies to atlasing, right? Outside of just kind of the incidental observations, which incidental observations, Kate, you're right. That's a great way to just get the higher breeding codes. But outside of the just getting incidentals, you can take two approaches, right? You can go out birding and just cover as much ground in your block as possible and create this gigantic list of species. The flip side of that is you can go out and spend more time staying still in a particular location and getting confirmations or higher probable codes. I spent 45 minutes once trying to get a winter wren confirmed. It was quite enjoyable because I just hunkered down in the woods, but it was a huge time investment to get one species confirmed. And so I really enjoyed it, but it's, you know, yeah, as a volunteer, you need to find that balance where I love all of the different bird background images, by the way, that are popping up in the videos. And so one, I would say it depends on the time of year, maybe which strategy you might utilize this time of year or kind of come end of May or through May. It might be more worthwhile to go and cover ground and create that species list. And then once we get into June and July, at least for the passerines and near passerines, when their activity ramps up, that's the time of year when it's especially productive to really invest that time in just sitting still and waiting for the birds to return to their normal behaviors. So that's a great suggestion and point. Thanks for bringing that up, Craig. How do we count volunteer hours if you are together? So, Logan, correct me on this in eBird if I'm wrong, but if you are together with another person, you should not double count your hours. When you enter your hours, that, you know, if you had a partner and you guys covered the same area or the same amount of time, that should just be 3 hours, not 6. If, however, you go out into a block and you know, maybe you say, well, you know, we're going to park the car in this location and you walk this way and I'll walk the other way, you want to count those hours separately. So that's as far as like what's contributing to the hours in the block, those would get counted separately.
This is on the volunteer,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah,
Because
so
when we submit on our iPhone, if we submit it, it just gives the total hours for one set of observation anyway, but it asks how many people were with you.
it does. So are you talking about like when you enter your time and effort for the match?
Right.
Yes.
Yes, you want to double that because we want to get paid for both of you.
Okay.
So you're saying
Yep.
when we enter it on the computer in your form, if there were two of us and we were in the exact same location, counting the birds, we're out for an hour, Gary has to go into his and enter his 2 hours, and I have to go into mine and enter mine?
Well, yeah, so if it depends on if you each have set up a separate volunteer account, then just enter, yeah, he would enter 2 hours for his 2 hours and you enter your 2 hours. If you just create one volunteer account, but you're using it jointly in that citizen science tracking portal, I would double it. So I guess it depends on how you're entering the data, but both of your hours should count.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, where are we in the questions, Logan?
So we have a good question that has been answered in the chat, but let's re-emphasize it. So Mary Grace asked if we noted a breeding pair in 2018 and 19, do we want it noted again in 2020? And Craig did answer this, and this is something that's been covered before, but as a rule, yeah, you don't have to put in redundant entries for confirmed species if it's the same code, but improving upon that code is encouraged. So if you see a lower confirmation and you're able to, find a nest, certainly you would go ahead and enter that. But, for the project, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, Adrian, confirmed is confirmed. If you confirm a species, you can just move on and try to confirm probable species. But you certainly can enter confirmations that you see, but it's not required. So once it's been confirmed, you can move on.
Yes. And just in case other folks didn't see Kate's message, she just kind of gave a personal reflection of how successful she's been without even leaving her own property. When she's outside, she often just kind of pauses to watch birds as they're moving around her, and I do the same thing and look for interesting behavior. I also, if one of the things that I really cue in on for behavior is I listen for if a bird is agitated. If the reason that I knew that cardinal and I started paying attention to the cardinals building in the bush outside my window was because every time I would come by, one would be up in a tree on the opposite side of my driveway chipping angrily or agitated. I'm like, okay, something's going on here. So the agitated, that's a higher probable code, but for a cardinal in my yard, I know that I can get that more if I just pay attention a little bit. So often just the vocalizations and kind of keying in on vocalizations and following birds that way has been really helpful for me as well. Good questions, everyone. So to follow up on redundant pair, add to your list, but don't bother with a breeding code. So you're always welcome to add things to your list. And you can attach a breeding code with it if you have it for that sighting. Even if it's a lesser code and you want to just have a complete data entry, you can put it in. I think, and again, this gets to the different approaches and strategies. For some people, it's very important for them to really maintain those complete eBird checklists. Every day they go out, they want a complete list of everything they've seen. And this is what I encourage people to do, especially for the Atlas. I tend to get overwhelmed by things that I've already confirmed, especially if you're in an area where there's a lot of birds. I tend to get overwhelmed, like, oh, I already have song sparrow and black-throated green warbler and hermit thrush. I need to focus on the red-eyed vireo and the blackpoll warbler, or, you know, the winter wren or whatever. So it never hurts to add it to your list. I think, you know, often when we say, once we have it confirmed for a block, we don't really need it. That's more for the Atlas specific side of things. I don't want to ever discourage anybody for, you know, eBird appreciates all of this data, and the Atlas data is essentially, you know, helping to fill up that larger eBird database. So your checklists are not going, you know, other redundant sightings are not going to be lost. They're still going to contribute to eBird. But as far as, you know, if you want to really be out there prioritizing your time for helping the Atlas, then yes, those redundant pairs, you don't have to keep kind of paying attention to. So yeah, I'm looking at the time. So we are at 4 o'clock. Logan and I are happy to stay on and kind of keep going through things as much as folks need. Our intent was that we could also go back to the other room, but we had to change that whole setup. So Logan and I will stay on, but as you guys feel, you know, at ease and helped with everything, you're welcome to sign off and go enjoy the rest of this beautiful afternoon. I will just do a quick reminder that we are going to be continuing with our weekly Q&As. So if you have some other things in mind that we didn't get to today, or that didn't get touched on, or that even if you felt like, oh, maybe they were too basic for the conversation today, I'll be sending out regular email notices with the links and information for those Q&A sessions. This coming Wednesday, I have no idea what the date will be, 29th maybe, will be Wednesday, whatever this next Wednesday is, 6:30 to 8 o'clock, we'll have another kind of just informal discussion session like this, and we'll be doing those weekly. So
yeah, and I'll just put in a plug here for special species. So we do have those webinars coming up over the next 2 weekends. So marsh bird next weekend, next Saturday at 1 o'clock, night jars the following weekend, that's the 9th, 1 o'clock.
And I've also been informed, I did not realize that this is National Volunteer Appreciation Week.
Oh.
So I really, even more so, thank all of you for your participation and efforts and contributions to the Atlas. Happy Volunteer Appreciation Week, everyone. Ellen asked, will we be emailing when the presentation links are uploaded? Yes, absolutely. So those will be linked to the department YouTube channel, and I am hoping to get those posted by Monday, or on Monday, I should say. All right. Bye, Bob. Thanks for your help. Bye, everyone that might be leaving.
Right. Let's see.
How do you know, Logan, how we save this chat? Because Bob gave us some really good feedback.
Yes. Yep. I will have it saved.
Oh, wait, but do you know how it saves? Like if he messaged me privately.
If he messaged you privately, I think you're going to have to. That's a good question. Let me just try this real quick. I'll do an experiment.
Maybe I have to say.
Yeah, you might have to save your own, but let me see. Okay, so save chat, show in folder.
So I clicked save chat. Do you know how do I find it? Where did I
If you, let's see, once you save it, you should see a little dialog that says show in folder. And here we go. It created its own.
Oh, oops.
There we go, text file. Okay, yeah, so private messages for just you will show up in your own saved log. So I saved it and I've got private messages that were sent to me, but they are captured.
Okay, so I had to save my log separately though.
Yes.
Okay, so I did that, but how do I know where it goes?
So when I downloaded it, let's see if I can do it again. So it says, once you hit save chat, it says chat saved, and then right over it, it says show in folder. It looks like it auto creates a folder.
Oh, I clicked save chat, but I didn't see anything happen. Oh, maybe it's because I'm still sharing my screen.
Oh, maybe.
I'm all confused. Okay, let me try this.
What it did for me, and it's probably going to be the same for you, in my documents folder, a new folder called Zoom appeared, and then there was a folder with the date, and then a text file with the chat.
Oh, I think I just couldn't see that because I was still sharing my screen.
Yeah.
Let me try this again. Yeah, so Bob was reminding me of like I couldn't remember, in Pennsylvania they did so, and we could maybe talk about this over next winter, of adjusting the completion requirements again. So they adjusted completion requirements not just based on the remoteness or adjusting the confirmed and probable codes, but for blocks like what Nick was dealing with, where the entire block is kind of more homogeneous in habitat.
Yeah,
you're going to have a lesser species list accumulated anyway. So then they did something different in GIS to adjust block completion requirements for areas.
That makes sense.
Okay. Save chat. Oh, show in Finder. Yep, I couldn't see that. The last time. Got it. Okay. Perfect.
Okay, so folks that are still here, do any of you have any questions? We're still certainly here and willing to answer.
I know A. Siegel had a question earlier about the personal points in eBird. Multiple points. Is it multiple points for the same place?
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
Because I have changed those before, and you can consolidate them if you have a bunch in an area, but I haven't done it for like half a year, so I would have to figure it out again. I don't know if either of you knows off the top of your head how to do it.
Yeah, not off the top of my head, but there is a fairly easy way to do it. I'm going to remind myself here.
It might be in eBird, instead of like manage your checklist, I think there's like a manage your.
Yeah, manage my location.
Hotspots or something. Yeah, manage your locations.
Yeah.
I know I have about 20 dots over my house and should probably consolidate.
Hi, cheaters, come on. I always know when I've been sitting in this chair too long because all of my animals start getting restless. I'm still trying. I'll let you if you can figure that out or work through that. I'm still just trying to figure out how to save my chat.
Oh no.
But, okay, kitty girl, come on.
I was impressed that Puck, he was here, but he was quiet today. And who was it? It was Craig who remembered him from Wednesday night.
Ooh, Chuck?
Puck, my cat, who made such a
Oh, yes.
impact. Wow, those are big green eyes on that cat.
She has big green eyes. She's very petite otherwise, but she has big green eyes. I know.
So who was Fire again?
I do not know. File. Move to. Oh, there we go. God, that was ridiculous.
But you didn't draw on your screen.
I didn't draw on my screen.
That's funny. I wonder how Doug did that from here.
He had an annotate. I saw the option to do it, but I didn't ever figure out how to turn it on or off. I didn't have time to play around with that.
It was really obvious on my phone, but I'm on my computer tonight, so I don't know.
So I guess I'm just kind of curious for those of you still, I don't know who Fire is, but how did you think that went, Kate? Did it like?
I thought it went pretty well.
Okay.
I mean, obviously there weren't as many people as we were expecting, and given the fact that it was only an hour, there's only so much you can address.
Right.
But you managed to answer all the questions that people asked.
I think it was definitely, when we were talking about setting it up, Doug went through like, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the beginner group. And Evan, and Glenn had very clear points for the advanced group. And they were like, so what are you guys going to talk about in the intermediate? And, but I really felt like that was a good kind of solid intermediate grade conversation.
Right, because it's people who have been doing it a little, but want more information. When Doug said that his was going to be quite structured, I was like, oh, I'm glad I'm in the intermediate, because I think I would have just been like along for the ride in his group.
Yeah, well, it was going to be very much like, this is how to set up an eBird account. And then when you go to
I could probably use, because I spent like an hour on the phone with one of my people the other day trying to like figure out how to help her change a portal. But so one thing that I noticed was when you brought up your eBird checklist, what I was seeing on my computer was that there was like green on the top, or maybe it was on my phone. I thought I did it on my computer as well, because we really tried to figure out how to help her change her portals. So she didn't understand what I was talking about, because mine was green. And then yours today was blue, because she said, well, I see blue. So
okay.
After I saw that, I sent her an email saying, this is what I saw. Maybe that'll work.
Yeah. It is. It's hard to talk. I was on the phone with Ron Joseph for an hour yesterday, just getting him set up. And I was trying to just talk to him about how to identify bookmarks and things. So, or like how to set the bookmarks. And I was like, okay, well, what browser are you in? All right, well, let me go get my Mac so I can look at Safari. And then I know I'm looking at what you're looking at. Okay, do you see this little plus sign? No, where's that plus sign?
Well, and she had an Android and I have an iPhone. So like even the way things show up on the eBird app are different.
Yeah.
So I was like, so go here. I like finally figured it out. She's like, well, I don't have that.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. But
have you made any progress, Logan?
I have. So I'm gonna do that real quick. We'll demonstrate how it's done. So just so that it's on this video, and then we can stop the recording. But so I'm gonna get back to regular old eBird first. Okay, so
Well, this was to change the location.
yeah, to merge those locations.
The guy that asked the question has left the chat.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll just have it
Okay.
documented on the video, so if people end up watching this video after, they'll see what to do. So so you'd go to my eBird, manage my locations. So I also have a bunch right near my house. Oh, hold on, there we go. So you'd search out that personal location.
How did it pull out cabin? Like if you don't have cabin in the name, how does it pull that out?
I typed it, I searched it. Oh, if it doesn't have it in the name, I'll show you. You'll see what it looks like. So then it brings up the personal location. And then if you hit this merge button here, it'll bring up all of the checklists in the area.
Oh.
And so I've got another park cabin here. And so if I click on that, it shows how many checklists are at that personal location. And then I have the option to merge right there. So I would click that to merge that. I'm not going to do that right now, but what would happen, so if I did click merge, it says, are you sure you want to do this? Can't be undone. It would delete that other personal location, and all of those checklists would come over to Parker Cabin.
But there is a delete after merging box.
Yeah, you could uncheck that if you want to, like, you could leave it there, and then you'd have both there, but the checklist would still all go over to that one you're merging with. So, yeah, I haven't done that in quite a while. I know I have a few places I should go and clean up that are, you know, I've started new spots, especially if they're near hotspots. Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording now, and I think we're pretty good. So thanks again.